Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and in the spirit of the trees and all living things, I want to welcome you to this 424th session of Humanity Rising. I'm particularly pleased today to be able to introduce our theme, which is on Grofian Psychedelic Therapy. As you all know, those of you who've been part of Humanity Rising over the past 18 months, we have featured Stan Grof a number of times. Last year, on July 1st, 2021, it was Stan's 90th birthday. And so each month, starting in January of 2021, we convened people that had been important in his life, that have contributed to his work, that have learned from his immense wisdom across a range of areas. Stan Grof is considered by many people to be really the great psychologist after Freud and Jung, who expanded the notion of the psyche back not only into the womb experience that we all undergo for the 9 months we're in our mother's womb, but also deep into the unconscious. And he was one of the earliest researchers in LSD when it was still legal to do so in the 1950s and 60s, and then developed the holotropic breathwork, which we'll go into. And we're very pleased today, as through all that, we met Javier Charme. And he's Chilean. He's been a student and now partner with Stan and Brigitte Groff for a number of years. He's a professionally trained clinician in Chile. He's one of the prime movers in Stan Grof's legacy training. He has a particular specialty in psychedelic therapy, which you may know is gaining traction all over the world as extraordinarily effective in dealing with a range of mental, psychological, and emotional challenges. And he's doing his PhD at Ubiquity. And Stan and Brigitte Groff are his major advisors. And working with Javier, we are in the process actually of developing a PhD program in Grofian Psychology. So there's a lot of things that we're doing here with Stan and Brigitte Groff and Javier Charme, who I want to welcome now to our Humanity Rising session, is in the middle of all that. So Javier, thank you so much for joining us today. And rather than me doing the heart coherence meditation as we usually do, I've asked Javier, who has deep meditative experience, to lead us in an opening meditation. And then Javier is just going to tell us, his life story and how he got involved with psychology generally, psychedelics in particular, the history of his association with Stan Grof and Brigitte Groff, and then I'll circle back and we'll have a dialogue for the balance of the time. Any of you that have comments or questions, put them in the chat and we'll bring them in. So welcome everyone, and Javier, welcome to Humanity Rising.
Hi, Jim. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's really a tremendous pleasure and a big joy to be here with you talking. I've seen many of the chapters you've been doing along all this time, and I really like them very much. So it's really a super big honor to be here. And you say you invite me to do a little meditation. So yeah, happily, may I invite all of you watching this that we can meditate a few minutes maybe. So maybe you can just slowly close your eyes. Maybe the back a bit straight, shoulders a bit back. Maybe just for a moment, just really relax and let go. And maybe to begin centering ourselves, maybe we can just count 7 mental breathings, no? 1 on the inhalation, and very slowly 1 mentally on the exhalation. We'll just do 7. Then just relax your mind 1 moment in this present moment, in this space. And now you can imagine that while you're breathing in, you're inhaling love and compassion. They come up your 2 channels. And when they come up to the head, the inhaling, it comes down as just emptiness and space. So we inhale love and compassion. When it comes up to the head, we bring it down as just space, no? Emptiness. We also do this 7 times. Last time. Just taking a moment to relax. Then we take this infinite space and we just ground it in the body, no? We try to like root into our bodies, no? So our consciousness can cover the whole body, like backwards, frontwards, side to side, bottom to top, really in the body. And if you want to move, stretch, and make yourself a bit comfortable, you can do it. And then we can slowly open our eyes whenever you're ready, and we can begin if that's fine. Okay, so welcome again. Here it's just afternoon. I don't know where you are, in which countries you are, but thanks again for taking this time so we can talk a bit, no? And at the end, I'm sure we're probably going to have some time for questions, answers, or comments, or whatever you want to share. First of all, please forgive my English. I'm Chilean, as Jim was saying, and English is my second language, so I'm going to try to do my best, but please forgive me if my English is not too good. So it's hard to begin talking about myself because it's something that, being a Buddhist, I don't like much to do, because each time you build yourself, you have to deconstruct yourself, no? But I'm going to try to share a bit of myself now. Anyway, we're going to talk about Grofian Psychedelic Therapy, no? So maybe share a bit how is that I came into this. I think my interest in changing consciousness began very early. I'm 47 years old now, and when I was 14 years old, I had, with a bit of naughty friends, my first experiences of kind of in different states, trying different things. So first I tried a bit of marijuana, and I was very interested. I thought it was very impressive how it could change your mind, your heart, could just make you see things a bit different. So I thought it was quite interesting, And then we try a few other things, but I had one intense experience when I was about 15, taking some medication that is actually for Parkinson's, And I don't recommend it to anyone. It's pretty awful, But what it makes you hallucinate like a monkey. I mean, total hallucination, that you can know what's going on. And I didn't learn anything like nice from there, but what I was extremely impressed was about how you can modify your mind chemically. How, I mean, just a little modification of chemistry can make you hallucinate and talk to things that are not there, and really be in a total alternative reality, So I think that was the first time I really thought, wow, studying the mind must be something incredible. This is something fascinating. And then not long after that, about 15, we have here San Pedro, which is a cactus that contains mescaline. And about 14, 15, 16, 17, I had several experiences with it, and they were quite good. I was interesting, aesthetic, beautiful, enough to invite my attention into it, but nothing like life-changing, And then when I finished school, my mother was a diplomat, so she was sent to South Africa. And in South Africa, I met some friends, and then for first time, I was able to try LSD, which I had read the Dose of Perception and other books, But that time I was smoking pretty much marijuana, So I was interested in the path, but I could never find any LSD. I just could not get it in South America. So as soon as I was living there, I made some friends. The first thing I wanted to score was LSD, so I could try it. And again, I had a bit older friends. We went to parties, into the mountains, into nature, had several experiences, and they were good, interesting, but again, not life-changing, And the day I was in South Africa, and the day I became 19, for my birthday, I went with a couple of friends to the beach, and I took double dose, like 2 full papers. And I think probably astrologically it was my birthday, the planets were well aligned, But that day I had the first spiritual experience in my life. I remember I was in a beach in Africa, and with the water until my knees about, And I suddenly closed my eyes, and I saw my whole life, like in picture, many things that had happened. I was only 19, so it wasn't such a long life, But I saw many things, and they came and stopped like in the present. And what I felt was like if all that karma was kind of equalized, And then I opened my eyes, and the sun was setting, and when I saw it, was like being in awe. Like, what? Like I could not believe what I was seeing, and I felt like in the deepest part of my cells that what I was seeing was God. That this reality, as it is, the planet, the universe, the sun, the moon, life, people, that this was it. This was the most sacred thing there is. Life, God, And I just knew it so deep. It shocked me, It was like if I've heard you see in Colombia, they do these initiations they used to do in certain lineages to taitas, no? Where the taita would spend the first 3, 7, 9, and even 13 years inside a cave. And they would not see the world, but they would talk to them about the world. And then when the taita, the initiate, comes out of the cave and sees for first time life, when he's 9, 13, he falls into big shock of awe. And this awe accompanies him throughout his whole life, no? So for me, that moment was a bit like this, like, what? It was like if I was living my life like an automata, I don't know how you say, like I have never really questioned life itself, I was like living in a dream, but never saw what the dream was, like the depth of being a human being, no? So anyway, it was a very beautiful, profound experience. I felt healed in so many ways. I felt it saved me years of suffering. And I learned for the first time, like I understood the spirituality very deeply from within without even knowing what spirituality was, no? But I remember a short time after that, a friend, they're asking me, like, Javier, are you a very spiritual person? And I hadn't even thought about it, So anyway, this first experience, like, made like a very beautiful connection with psychedelics in general that I didn't have before. Always were good journeys, but this one was a bit more impressive, no? And after that, it was like I became very good friends with psychedelics, particularly with LSD. So pretty much since then, all the time I had when I was young, I was pretty tripping, no? So we would go again to parties and into nature, or in the water, or in the mountains. And it was beautiful. Very fast, I would come to, because the first hours, always 2, 3, 4 hours, are a bit like tough, you kind of have to manage a bit the coming in, no? But then pretty soon after that, I would start coming home, no? And coming home with gratefulness, with awe, with just very impressed about just being alive and about life, no? And I had many of those. And then before 20, when I came into the Grof training, I had maybe 70, 80 LSD trips, and I thought I knew psychedelics. I knew I could manage them, kind of, no? And so I read a teacher of mine. I came back from Africa to South America, and a teacher at school. She had a PhD in the States on, a PhD in psychology, and she, I don't know why, she lent me a book of Stan, no? Which was The Adventure of Self-Discovery. And when I read that book, I felt in love with psychology, because I knew I was studying psychology, but I was looking to try to finish my career so I could work. But I wasn't very impressed with conductism and cognitive therapy, and many of the things I was studying, I was just not impressed. And on the other side, I was having beautiful spiritual experiences with psychedelics, and I had my spiritual search. So this book kind of showed me that there was in psychology something so deep about psychedelic work. So I fell in love with Stan's work. I ate the book, love it, no? And by these synchronicities of life, a little time afterwards, I saw some publicity in the university that they were going to do a holotropic breathwork workshop. And a friend of mine that was at university had gone to Argentina to the first holotropic breathwork session in South America, I think. And when he came back, he told me, wow, people were reliving their birth, having spiritual experiences, reliving trauma. And I was like, what? How can I get to this, no? And then very shortly after, they put this publicity. So I went to the training and I fell in love with the work. I loved the philosophy, the way, the respect, the clarity of stance, the way he writes. Stan, he speaks many languages, about 12, 14 languages. So I think he's the less obscure psychologist of them all for me, you can read a paragraph and it's just precise and very clear, no? Even when he goes into things that are very hard to describe, can be extremely lucid, no? So I went into the training and loved it, no? I was super interested. And very soon as I got into the training, I was able to get LSD psychotherapy. And when I read this book, I had what I needed, no? I had the medicine, I had the will, I had people that could take care of me. And when I was 21, I had my first psychedelic session properly, 500 mics. And it was incredible, totally, utterly, it killed me. Like it killed my ego, like severely, And I realized that all what I have done before with psychedelics, that I thought I knew something, I pretty much haven't seen anything. I realized that the depth and the way that you can use these medicines for inner exploration went far beyond what I was doing in the outward world, which I'm grateful for it. I think it's also very legitimate use. But when you go in this way, wow, you realize who is Stan, So I had this experience, a few of them, and then very soon I had my first prenatal experience. And when you have a prenatal experience in high doses with LSD, it's not like, oh, is it this maybe perinatal? No, it's like big head, small body, floating in different positions. And I had for 5 years just BPM ones. So at that time, also about 21, I was, for the first time I could get mushrooms, which I could never get in Chile also, So I had to go to Argentina to get them, bring them back, And I was fascinated, and I knew the doses was 5 grams about. So I had this equation, me plus 5 grams of mushrooms equal BPM 1. And it was 5 years, and I did many, many, many sessions, maybe there have been at least 40 or 50 between LSD and high doses with psilocybin. But this was totally, absolutely, purely perinatal BPM 1, glorious, beautiful, And in the center was the big head, there totally 100% in the uterus, and suddenly it will opens into devotion and gratefulness, and then like non-duality, absorption in consciousness, and then through a whole range, sometimes some archetypes, beautiful opening, and then just to like gratefulness. So I would come between the fetus and the fusion with totality, a lot of gratefulness and spirituality, and just crying. I remember many times you could just say, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, like a mantra. Thank you, 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 thank you. Yes, blah, crying, yes. Poof, was beautiful. And at that time, I thought that maybe I was just, my matrix was BPM 1. I thought maybe my birth process was mellow, maybe it wasn't too hard, and maybe just because astrologically, it's what it is, So this kept, I tell you, for 5 years, between 21 about to 26, 7. BPM 1 is a basic perinatal matrix, which means that when you relieve birth, Stan he expands, and maybe I can talk later about this, But he expands the map of the unconscious. So he talks about biographical experiences since you're born until now, and they occur, and because there's many traumas for things that happen and things that didn't happen, for commission and omission, But then people tend to relieve their birthing process and gestation. So the first matrix is what I was describing, and it's the first 9 months usually. And if it's nice and there's no big perturbations or attempts of abortion or a lot of difficult emotions, for example, it's kind of okay. What you feel is this, you feel one with love, one with the mother, one with the universe, because your mother's tummy is the universe when you are there, So I had a lot of this experience, but it was very literal, again, the body, big head, small body, and floating in different positions. I would move, and the movements were like aquatic, like kind of bouncing. And the experience would last that pretty much the whole experience. So, if it was LSD, about 7, 8, 9 hours, 100% this. And it was with psilocybin, 4 or 5 hours of 100% this. In different variations, but very, very clear what was in the middle was totally perinatal, prenatal, actually. So that's BPM 1. And one day, I'm ready to have another session because I was loving them, I was pretty wild when I was young, but at the same time, I did have the maps. I met Stan when I was 20, and I had the maps. I kind of knew, and that's why I also think it's so important to have Grofian Psychology if you're a psychonaut, I knew kind of the dimensions of consciousness, and I knew that eventually I was going to come out supposedly of the prenatal matrices. And so far, everything Stan had said was right. So I kind of knew this could happen eventually. So then one day, I take 6.5 grams of mushrooms and I jump into my thing ready to go into my BPM-1. And suddenly, it's like if I was in a bag, in a bag full of water, very tight like an egg, no? And suddenly I get put on my head, like upside down, just only balancing in my head, no hands, against the wall, no? And floating. And I was totally, utterly full of anesthesia. So the body was like very asleep, no? But hanging in my head. And suddenly the head turns and I come spiraling out of, wow, like 1.5 meters on the carpet. And then like the first breath. And then suddenly, boom, again, whoop, into this, my little bottle of water, my little egg of water, no? And again, in with my feet up, and again spiraling, and my head will twist very hard. I just come out, and again, the first breathing, and the first breathing. And this happened many, many, many times. And then I was very impressed too, because at that time I had many experiences, and I was being born against the music stereo. Like this was how heroic it was, And my friend, my girlfriend at that time, she had taken 5 grams and she had to take care of me. I was utterly and totally gone and totally into matrix 3-4 is this. The second one is when the cervix is closed, there's contractions, so there's no way out. No, it's the beginning of contractions, but there's nothing you can really do. So there's a lot of suffering. There's a lot of hopelessness, despair, suffering, etc. No, the third one is when the fetus starts fighting to come through the channel. So there's still asphyxia, pain, separation from totality, but there's like an aim, and you're pushing to strive. And where I was in the end of this and getting to the 4th matrix, which is when you actually go through, which is much more Uranian. No, the third one is more Plutonian. And I was being born and being born and being born. And this, that part, to just go really through the whole 4th matrix and finishing being born, took me many, many years and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of sessions. And you see, I can explain this because, actually the perinatal matrix, the memory of gestation and birth is huge in the unconscious. Huge. But in my case, my mother, when my sister was born, the doctor was going for lunch, my father was going for lunch. I said, and my mother, yeah, go, have fun, yeah, see you later. And they left and she got into labor. So like 1.5 hours later, when the doctor came back, she found my mother hyperventilated with the baby about to come out, and she really suffered. My sister is 6 years older than me. So when I was gonna be born, my mother said, I want some anesthesia. Give it to me, So she had even self-applicable anesthesia and she indulged. So as Stan says, and I really believe this, it's the only way I can explain this, no? Anesthesia makes the memory of the birthing process much more harder to get into because it gets like kind of repressed in the unconscious because of the big amount of anesthesia. So this memory of the birth process came in many, many chunks and pieces from different angles and in different, from extremely, totally, and fully physical. And this was many, 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 many sessions, totally 100% it. I mean, like if I put rewind into my life, the moment of just being born, play, being born again. And this I went through the channel, I'm not lying, like hundreds of times, literally. And then it started moving, but I could not, it took me some time to understood this, because it was totally physical, the baby, all the pains, and in many sessions I had different aspects of this. So for example, I remember one session, there was a tremendous pain here, like someone standing on a broom like around here, and from there I would go into again the upside down position and being born. Another session, all this also, but I could hear my skull crashing. I could, like a liquid, like something, and I could hear a lot of those in that session in particular. And then different angles, and then with time and many sessions, start moving more into the crowning. And the crowning was incredible, you know. All this, by the way, all this birthing process, they come with some super deep, beautiful spiritual experiences. Very like BPM-1, the kind of ecstasy is very Neptunian. Stan calls it Apollinian. And it's like the body relaxed, the mind very open, and you're like one with everything. It's like a samadhi, you know, like super relaxed and gone, absorption. But these kind of ecstasies are much more like explosive. Like this like ecstasy of just crying and just pushing your hair, just like Allah in the seventh heaven. Like very mystical, but very devotional and super strong, beautiful, no? And then start moving, start having some openings into archetypes. So suddenly I would see like a Taurus, how do you say? Like a Minotaur kind of being, pushing, standing on top of the world while I was, you know, being born. And then many more archetypes and sometimes sequences of other times. Suddenly I was in the middle of the birthing process and suddenly, it's like Russia. So it union something, no? And it's like war. What? And then I'm out of there, I'm being born again, no? So it started opening more and more into the transpersonal, but still with a super heavy chunk of being born, no doubts about it, you know? And then it started changing until there was much more transpersonal and less of the perinatal, but I couldn't believe it because it was dozens and dozens and dozens and more dozens and just couldn't go through because there was still, I could see somewhere something going through. When I was being born, many times my hand would go over my head and just come into this explosive liberation, no? And then finally, I had sessions and, well, no birthing process. Had another one, nothing. Wow, fully transpersonal. Again, nothing. And then like the fourth or fifth, mega one put, and again I could hear a little being born. No? Then, oh my God, it's never finishing. So then finally it disappeared. Now it's not coming anymore. No. So I tell you this because I live the Grofian map of consciousness from within. And I think there's a point of change in journey exploration, the psychedelic, that is when it becomes perinatal. And if it becomes perinatal, as it usually does, then you have to become Grofian. Because this was not even seen by Jung, not by Freud, not by Reich, no? So once you live it in this intensity, the only way you can go is really Grofian psychology. So then I became, of course, super in love with Stan and his work. I admire him profoundly, no? And I think he's got the most precise maps of consciousness available in the planet today. And I would say that by far, no? So then I would translate sometimes Stan when he was coming here. I was his driver when I was very young. Then I went to study to the States at CIS, and Stan was like my mentor there to go there. I had a whole year of classes with him. And then we started becoming like much closer, no? I became the director of the Grofian training in South America about 14 or 15 years ago. Then my life has been very involved in facilitating holotropic states. So I've done a lot of breathwork sessions in many countries. I have led many of the training rounds here in South America. And I've done a lot of psychedelic sessions with friends, with clients, with people I know, with my family, with people I love, no? And that's pretty much how it came. It was a bit long the introduction, but that's kind of how I came into Grofian Psychedelic Therapy, basically, no? And then with Stan, he also came a few times to South America, and we went to different countries. We did many talks and workshops and many activities. I had the huge luck of 3 years having holidays with Stan in different countries. We went to Peru, we went to Iguazu Falls, and then we went to Isla de Pascua also. Then another time into Galapagos. So I had the time to spend a lot of time with Stan. Also was super lucky of having him as someone I could come and talk sometimes a bit these pretty strong experiences I was living. So then things happen like this, no? And then by different coincidences, the legal situations of psychedelics start becoming to change and becoming more open. And by that time, we had very developed the whole of the Grofian Psychology training. So we have many videos from Stan, very powerful web pages. I mean, no web pages, like, how do you call? Pages, no, like virtual pages where we have many courses and information, and we're pretty advanced in this, no? So things happened in a way that we could open actually a psychedelic training in Spain, and it's in Spain because the legal situation there allows for the use of psychedelic under certain parameters, which means an association, and within this association we can use pretty much everything. So this possibility came, and with Stan, we started working on a program for psychedelic therapies for a full training. And this condensated into a 500 hours, 3 years program, which is deeply theoretical, but also very much experiential. So what's beautiful about this program is that besides going very deep into all the theory, that it's very important to hold these holotropic states, we're also going to have several sessions of breathwork and also different sessions with psychedelics. So we're going to be working with psilocybin and with LSD. Psilocybin in a group context with sitters, and we're going to have 3 high-dose LSD sessions per participant. And this is incredible. No? It's the first time this happens in many, many years in this planet. So we're really, truly looking forward. We're in the middle of people applying into it. So if some of you is a therapist and you're interested in psychedelic therapy, you can see this information in Beckley Meds. I don't know, Jim, if I think I talked too much. If there's anything you want to talk or you want me to go into, I'll be super happy. Maybe you want to go into specifics. Please let me know.
No, you're giving a splendid narration here. I'm totally fascinated by your psychedelic journeys, Javier. I think one of the things, having set up all the BPMs and so forth as you went through them, I think it would be worth at this point to kind of summarize in one statement the different stages that Stan pioneered that you went through so powerfully.
Well, you see, when you think about consciousness, if you look at Sigmund Freud, for example, he would say that we were born like an empty disc, like a tabla rasa, he would say, no? Meaning that we're born in a zero, and then everything that is in your soul, in your unconscious, in your mind, was somehow gained through your adventures in life, particularly through traumas, no? So this is the biographical level of the psyche, and it's 100% true. I mean, actually, things that happen in life do make an impression on us, So we have our neuroses, our repetitive patterns, because mommy, daddy, and friends were in some way. So this is very real, and in holotropic therapy, you have a very deep regression and relieve many of these traumas, and in this process, they heal themselves. When they become conscious, the psyche can process them and let go of them. So in holotropic states, you can work the biographical at least as well as you can do it in verbal therapy, but probably faster and deeper. Yeah? But clients start working with psycholytic therapy, which is psychoanalysis with, we could say, low mid doses, about from 100 to 200 about mics, no? And these sequential sessions that could go up to 100, averaging about 20, people would first start going through layers of biographical traumas. And then all of them would move into, if they keep going, into perinatal issues. From the gestation, BPM 1, 2, 3, and 4. And this becomes prominent. If you ask me, I think, let's say this is the unconscious. Here's the biographical. This is the perinatal. And then the transpersonal is huge. It's like the universe. Then there's no limits, no? What I've seen is that the amount of energy that is blocked in the system because of the birthing process is way superior than what we could encounter in a biographical normal trauma. And then this makes like a juxtaposition where there's a well of emotions and memories from the birthing process, and then different experiences laid over it, which are biographical, but have the kind of the same quality, emotions or physical sensations. And then the perinatal opens like a door into a transpersonal to similar things. No? So this I just described is a coexistence, a system of condensed experience. And this is super important because it's not just like a bunch of memories, but these are the directed programs of the psyche. So if you're under the influence of certain patterns of memories, you tend to see yourself and the world in certain ways. So when you can get into this depth of processing, what changes is you, is how you feel in a very felt sense, the way you see the world. I mean, we can say that there's few points where you could say most of psychology and philosophy are kind of in agreement. And one of those points in general, is that the way we perceive reality is subjective. And it's subjective because we're sitting in our mind, in our consciousness, which is in many ways unprocessed. So every perception is somehow a projection. So the more work you can do inside, the more kind of clearly we can see, with less perturbations, we can see the present moment, and be available to life, to the present moment. So that's kind of the map that Stan discovered. And this map, you really see it in holotropic states. And if it's with high doses, you really need this map, I would say.
Yes, of course. Another question that just is coming up, which I think people would be interested in, since you've experimented so deeply, Javier, across a range, excuse me, of different psychedelic therapies, how would you compare and contrast the effects? And how would you then compare the psychedelic experience with the holotropic breathing experience?
Wow. Well, that's a very good question, no? And it's difficult because, you see, in my experience, I began like most people, just taking a beat and going into nature or parties, and I enjoy it and I had very good times. I have to be sincere, no? I think there's a legitimate use for opening your senses, for just communing with nature, no? And I enjoyed each of them, no, with different compounds. But then when you come into therapy, again, you can work in different settings, but with different doses. So in each psychedelic is a different world altogether. If you take a small doses, I mean, a microdosage, let's not even mention, very, very mild, no? If I don't tell you and I give you a microdosage, you probably wouldn't even realize. But then with low doses, it's a bit lighter. But when you come to medium, and particularly high, it's like a different world altogether. And when you go from medium to high, the context needs to be very tight and very contained, very safe, because with over 5 grams of mushrooms, over 350, 500 mics of LSD, over 0.01 to 5 or 5 MEO DMT, for example, you cannot take care of yourself because you're in a very deep holotropic heroic journey. So if you go to high doses, you really need to be very well taken care for. And there, each of us has its own little beautiful thing, no? MDMA to begin with, it's also an empathogenic more, no? But let's consider it, no? I would say it's by far the mildest and easiest, no? Very few people have problems with it. And it's usually very just opening the heart. But some people that have some issues inside, this opening sometimes doesn't feel so pleasurable, no? So some people also have some tough times here with MDMA. But MDMA gets up to a certain roof and it doesn't go beyond that. Even if you put the doses higher, you don't get much deeper into this experience. So there's a exact point, which according to research is about 0.12, 0.13 of a gram, which is what they do in the research. And then half of that as a reload experience, no? We go to mushrooms now and psilocybin, which is very effective, very powerful. shorter lasting the activity, and somehow very, I would say, like tender. So I would say if you want to go into proper psychedelics, they begin for me are more like tryptamines, and they would be 5-MeO-DMT, psilocybin, LSD in this range, no? And psilocybin, I think, is wonderful, super sacred, beautiful, extraordinary. It has the capacity to take you biographical, prenatal, transpersonal. And I loved every session. I think it's very impressive, no? But if I had to compare it with LSD, I had to agree with Stan that it's unrivaled, no? I mean, even if you see the connection, the specificity of the connection, the receptors and the lengths it does it, and if you see this from a psychological perspective, no, the way in which it connects the conscious and the inner world, the conscious and the unconscious, supraconscious, or the ego and the self, no, this dialogue between this is the shallow part or the superficial part of oneself and the deepest cosmical spiritual being we are. In LSD, this is open like in 4K, turbo, 8D, you know, and very long time. So you feel like it's been equivalent to many of the others. Now that's my feeling, at least, no? And I'm also very impressed about LSD, how clear it is. Because, for example, ayahuasca is wonderful, no? But sometimes, for my taste, DMT is like too many images, too much, too many things, you know? And sometimes it's hard to get to the real traumatic issue, biographical prenatal. It's a bit more hidden behind all these images. Or if you go to DMT pure, you know, it's weird, it's extraordinary, but it's not so therapeutic for my taste, no? But with LSD, not so many images, but what is happening is really what's there. It's very clear in the way it cuts through the unconscious and takes you right into the trauma, right into the birthing process, right into the transpersonal experiences. And it's very clear, no? So I think it's really unparalleled. Of all that I've tried, LSD for me is superior. And then I had to make a little note on the side for 5-MeO-DMT, bufotenin, no, bufo alvarius, or the analog compound 5-MeO-DMT, which is incredible, no? I mean, then I would say from 1 to 10, you know? Let's say an ayahuasca session for me in the jungle, 7 days into the diet, 6th night, third time we take in the night, and you're like bouncing in the mattress, I would get for this one, like I say, from 1 to 10, a good 5. For the physical aspect, maybe 6. I put psilocybin, 6.5 grams of full, I'll give it a good 6, 7. You know, you're really fully, totally there. Huh? But I would give LSD in that a 10, 11, if it's up to 10. And the thing with 5-MeO-DMT is that it takes you right to the 11. But this opening is so fast, so abrupt, that you get into full, total, utter emptiness, nothingness, vacuity, nature, mind, ananda, fully, no? And yeah, that's the climax, because you don't go beyond infinite. That's as far as you can get, infinite, you know? But in terms of the communication between, again, the ego and the inner world, there's not so much neurosis burned into this process, I think. And to round this, I can say, because of my personal, I tried 5-MeO-DMT when I came to the States in 2002, I think it was. And I got plenty, and I peak on, I would say, the first time, no? But then I have super peak, as heavy as you can get, a few sessions afterwards, and then I took many times, no? But I peak fully into absolute consciousness. But from that moment until I went through the whole prenatal process, it took me maybe 70 more LSD sessions. So this allows me to see that it's possible to come to full communion, but still have quite a nice chunk of unprocessed biographical, prenatal, transpersonal stuff. So what I could say about the psychedelics, no? And about the last part, compared to holotropic breathwork, I think holotropic breathwork or Grof breathwork is very impressive. No, I have a lot of experience training people, and I have led several hundreds of workshops in different countries, and I love it because it's super reliable. Like if you have somebody having a bad time, a rough time, the first thing I would tell them, even having all the medicines, is to do breathing, because it's easy, fast, simple, legal, and it really gets to a point super easy. So it's very effective, very practical, and most people don't have problems with breathing or music, so it's easier to introduce. If I have many friends that have taken many psychedelics, and they have found the breathwork even stronger. If I compare holotropic breathwork to taking a medium, lower dosage in a party, in nature, with friends, breathwork is much stronger. If I compare breathwork to maximum dose psychedelics, no, it's a bit lighter, but it's a very great thing to have, no? And if you're gonna be doing psychedelic therapy from a Grofian approach, like holotropic breathwork is your best friend. Because if there's any difficulty, you can always reach to holotropic breathwork, and it allows you to, anything that gets destabilized in a holotropic session can be re-stabilized using holotropic breathwork. And this I've done a lot. Some of the people that I see, not an interesting amount of them come out of problematic psychedelic ayahuascas and this and that. And I have worked with many people, and 1, 2, 3 breathwork, and it's enough to balance the psyche again. So I really love breathwork. You know, I think it's a huge present for psychology in general, because psychedelics is a bit more specific. No, not all people like psychedelics, know about them, want to train into them, but breathing is more friendly, I think. Long answer, Jim.
Javier, take a few minutes for those of our audience that may not know about the holotropic breathwork, just to describe what a session looks like. What is the experience when you do holotropic breathwork? It takes a couple hours. What's the process? Tell us what that is all about.
Well, you see, when psychedelics got prohibited, Stan was doing in SLM, and many people wanted to, they loved the theory, but they wanted to have some fun too. And he could not give them psychedelics. So he remembered that sometimes people during psychedelic sessions would hyperventilate. This has happened to me in ayahuasca sessions, for example. You hyperventilate spontaneously, and then you're even deeper into experience. So he had observed this, no? So they start developing this technique, which is called holotropic breathwork, and it uses different therapeutic approaches together. So in the center, you have holotropic states of consciousness, but this is preceded by a theoretical introduction. Learn about consciousness, your psyche, which are the levels that it's kind of made of, and then traumas, what is a trauma, symptoms, how they appear, how they work, and then about non-ordinary states in general, transculturally, historically. So you make an introduction to understand what you're gonna do, why you would like to do it, no? And then all the specificities, what to do when you're a sitter, when you're a breather, the relation with the music, about body work and this and that. So you get a full preparation before you go into the experience, which is usually the next day. So if it's a one-day workshop, you come into a place, there's gonna be mattresses, you're gonna be working in pairs, and we alternate. So in the morning, one is gonna be doing the breathing, and the other one is on the side being a sitter. A sitter means sitting there, doing pretty much nothing unless there's something to do. If you're asked for something, you need to take the person to the toilet, keep them safe if necessary. But it's pretty much being there with the person without doing anything that is not really necessary. So for the person that is having the experience, you catalyze the holotropic states through hyperventilation and certain music. So this, what the holotropic state does is that it opens your unconscious. It kind of empowers the psyche energetically, and this allows for material to come out, and the defense mechanisms are bypassed temporarily. So you can actually access into your inner world, and things that are creating problems, that are the base of symptoms, can begin unraveling and becoming processed. So let's say you lost someone that you love very much, your grandma, your brother, something, no? And there's still this pain in your heart, no? It wouldn't be unlikely, if this is the main issue there, that when you start doing the breath work, you're gonna remembering the person, probably start crying and kind of doing a a reaction of the experience or catharsis, no? And the system starts liberating or simplifying its own functioning, liberating things that are creating problems. And then the unconscious becomes conscious. You start crying, and after you cry the last tear, that's the last tear. And then you're going to remember the person, but you're not going to be carrying it on you, like on your shoulders, no? For example. Or if there's tension in the body, because we tend to tense different parts of the body, like the right hand arm, or no? If there's tension, this tension kind of gets released. It amplifies itself, and if it amplifies enough, sometimes it can get like open itself, you know. So there's two aspects. One is you can really work very deeply with your shadow. I mean, with things that pains, sufferings that we have in the body, emotionally, relationally. And on the other side, you can also access very deep, powerful, beautiful spiritual experiences in the whole range, you know. And there's a lot of healing there too. It's very important to sometimes in life feel gratefulness, you know, or the mystery of being alive. I mean, and these things happen. And when you have it firsthand, you experience it, then it stays with you forever, I would say. So that's pretty much how it works. And after you have the experience, we check with you if there's any impasse, any blockages. The facilitators can work with you, help you to round it, to deep it, whatever is necessary. And then after this, you go into another room where you meditate a bit in what is that you lived, and you make a drawing. Like you try to kind of synthesize the experience into image. And then the other person breathes, you take care of him, he draws, and at the end of the day, we meet like in a circle and we talk about what happened. Sounds very easy. It is very easy, but it's very deep. Very beautiful too.
I can testify to that. It's
You've
very
seen it.
easy and it's very deep. All you do is breathe, basically, and
Very effective, no?
Let it flow. A couple of questions, Javier, from our community. One from Kevin in Canada, who's wondering about the relationship between DMT and essentially sensory deprivation exercises. Do you have any comment on that?
No, I have only tried LSD in sensory deprivation, but not like in Lily's ones, but in these flotariums. I had many years ago an experience with LSD and was quite nice. Then, I mean, I see maybe I'm not expert in DMT, you know, I have tried several times, but it's not my medicine. You know, I think it's wild, it's incredible, but I don't get the healing or for example, compared to 5-MeO DMT, I much rather prefer 5-MeO DMT. Even if you see Rick Strassman's books, you know, The God Molecule, the conclusion is that it's not so therapeutic. No, it's impressive, it's powerful, but I think DMT is very colorful. No, it's somehow related a lot to making images, but it doesn't get to the depth that you can get with other compounds. That's my impression. No, so it's a lot of noise, but not so many nuts. Somehow we have this saying that we have in English, no? So many relations may be there because maybe when dreaming, there may be some DMT involved, no? They also speculate maybe when you die and you release a bit of it. And in sensory deprivation tanks, I understand that after a while, I go every now and then, no? Usually without medicine, just. And yes, sometimes you can get a few images and things, you know, that are kind of just spontaneous. So there might be a relation there between DMT being produced in isolation, but I'm not expert in it, and I'm getting, this is a very light guess.
Yeah. Another question, Javier, from Kurt Kruger about the utility of psychedelics for addictions and mental disorders. What's your experience in that domain?
Well, I think it's very promising. For example, we can go one by one, and all of them have their little branches into rehab, into rehabilitation of drug addictions. So from ayahuasca, for example, there's several different centers that work with addicts and ayahuasca in a more broader psychological approach. So this is happening. For example, there's centers like Taquihuasi, for example, in Peru, and many others, no? Then there's some research being done now with 5-MeO-DMT for addictions. This is kind of new, no? And as you know, LSD, they were doing high dose sessions for alcoholics and drug addicts. This was one of the categories they were working with, and the results were extremely promising. I mean, in some of the studies, they were getting out of one psychedelic session up to 50% success, which if you have worked with addictions, this is unseen, no? So it's very promising, and with mushrooms too. It's very possible that psilocybin can also have a very important effect. But there's one very key aspect there, and is that the consumption needs to be cut. So you cannot be consuming and then do the experience. You need to have some for at least, depending on what they're addicts to, they need to be clean before having the experience. And this may take weeks or even months. Once they're really clean of the addiction, this can really be like to close the deal, no? To really keeps you out. But if you are consuming alcohol, and I've seen this, you can have a very powerful and convincing either holotropic or psychedelic experience, but then it's in the blood. And when it's in the blood, it starts calling you back. So then you're very likely to fall again into addictions. So it needs to be a more coherent approach with different therapists, with a preparation, cleaning of the drugs or the alcohol, and then apply the medicine, and then work in the integration. Done in this work, I think is super promising, very, very promising. Mm-hmm. And then what I haven't talked about, Ibogaine, no? Ibogaine. If you've seen videos in YouTube about the use of Ibogaine with heroin addicts, for example, it's impressive. It's almost unbelievable. You see the person coming there, they've been fixing for like 25 years, like almost with the needle hanging, like finished. Take them out, they have the session, and the next day they feel great. They don't have cravings, It doesn't work for everyone, but for an important amount of people, it does work. So among all of these ones, I think with a good understanding of addiction and a more integral approach, I think psychedelics could be a very nice thing for the future, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Now, Kevin in Canada is asking a very interesting question about, do you have any experience of people all getting together as a collective group, taking a psychedelic with a common purpose and a common thought? What's your experience in sort of the collective use of psychedelics?
Well, I have a bit of experience because I participate, for example, in many ayahuasca sessions, which are group, no? I also, when I was young and crazy, I lead some of them with psilocybin, for example, too. But where I saw many groups taking psychedelics, I was a trance DJ for many years, and we were with a friend, no? So I was in too many parties, from Goa to Kopangan in Thailand to here in South America and Europe, and we had some really good parties, and all my friends, they were indulging, no? But the common purpose was to have a great time, and we did. We celebrate life, we dance like a monkey, but we didn't have much deeper purpose than that, if there is deeper than that, no? So that's what I've seen, and sometimes in some of these parties, for example, there were things happening. For example, we make a very big circle, 400 people. I don't know if all of them were in medicine, but many of them. And then there was some kind of intention put together or something like this. But that's as far as I have gotten, no? But I think it's very interesting. I mean, you can also enhance spiritual practices and intention, praying, putting your mind with love into a purpose. This can be for sure enhanced with psychedelics, no? Not in super high doses, but I think there's a dose range where you can really enhance your practice. For example, the first time I felt bodhicitta is like the mind of love, compassion, like deep, no? Was in an ayahuasca session before I knew the concept of bodhicitta. So these things happen, no? And sometimes psychedelics, well, also spiritually, psychedelics can open doors that are, I think, impossible to open in different ways, the magnitude of the spiritual experiences that you can have in psychedelics. I think you can touch the highest heavens that a human being can can fly, literally, no?
Mhm.
I think with psychedelics, you can have more experience, more spiritual experiences than a saint, and being a totally normal and having no merit whatsoever, you know? So,
Jan Calero has a question about how this work might be helpful for attachment trauma in infants. They obviously are too young to be doing any kind of work. It might be just for the parents, but the whole phenomenon of attachment trauma.
well, you see, I mean, in psychedelic therapy, for example, I was mentioning the biographical level of the psyche, recollective or Freudian, we call this level, no? And in this level, there's two main kinds of trauma. Things that happen to you and they hopefully shouldn't have happened, abuse, physical, emotional, sexual, no? Different abuse, verbal, no? And this makes like a little bubble in the unconscious of unprocessed experience, no? The second kind of trauma is because you didn't get something you needed. So being mammals, we need love. We need to have breath in certain way, in certain with certain affective quality. And then you need to be looked at and hugged and cared. And that they tell you that you're nice, that they love you, you're beautiful, no? So we need a lot of things just to love ourselves. We need to be loved. So many of us have gotten not as much as we would have liked to. And in this lack is also attachment. Sometimes mother was not available because she was out of it, she was drugged or she whatever, no? So we get the touch, the affect, the contention, the being seen. So one wonderful thing about holotropic states in general, psychedelics in particular, is that if this is your trauma, you see, in verbal therapy, you cannot tell someone how it feels and explain him how good it feels to be contained. Because I can be 2 hours explaining you, but it's in the head. But if you're not, and this happens a lot in holotropic breathwork, in psychedelics, sometimes the person comes into a very deep regression, into young age, and they feel scared, afraid, lonely, fearful, whatever, no? And you can offer very lightly physical touch. This is part of the psychedelic therapy, Grofian, and also holotropic breathwork, no? And sometimes you offer a bit the hand, and the people take the hand and they move and they hug you, for example, and then you can hug them or be with them or just stay with them, And this physical touch in a deep regression, what we have seen is that it can really refill these empty packages, this lacks of love, So you can give it into you can somehow fill this vacuum in the holotropic session. And this is part of what we learn when we are becoming facilitators, and we use it often. So this is an extraordinary, maybe one of the only ways of healing this kind of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say also empathogens like ecstasy. I think there might be space there too to somehow teach this ability of being a bit more open, more sensible. Maybe we can develop exercises, group dynamics or something like this. But I think the most powerful way is when it happens naturally and you can really be with the person there. That's why we also make a woman and a man, no? So there's two people and this can be done in a more open and way. And if the person needs the mother, there's a woman. If they need more like a male energy, there's a man, or both, This is super healing. That's what I could say about it.
Diane Skidmore has a question about the relationship between mushrooms and emotional freedom technique, which I think is just a larger question around sort of dual use, using psychedelics with the holotropic breathwork, psychedelics with EFT or acupuncture or polarity therapy. What's your experience, Javier, in the blending of different techniques? One, I would say, chemical, and the other, say, more straightforwardly psychotherapeutically processing.
Well, if we, let's say with holotropic breathwork, I did it a few times when I was younger. I knew of some other people that would do, and they would hyperventilate and maybe take a bit of MDMA or psilocybin or a bit of LSD, which I think is an interesting possibility to explore. But you see, if you really want to go full, then I mean, holotropic breathwork in itself, I think is enough, no? And then with psychedelic, if it's not enough, bring a bit higher the dose, and it's going to be enough. So I don't see in these two very necessary to mix them both. I think it's a bit unnecessary, no? And then if you mix psychedelics with other techniques, you have to be careful. Careful because it's the dosage is very important, and the context is very important, you know? So I think there's a range to mix certain things. The problem is if you mix group work, being this group dynamics or whatever kind of work you're doing, and you put psychedelics into it, the dose should be, I think, from middle down, probably more low dose, because if not, it's very easy that things get a bit mixed up, confused, and problems could happen, you know, because you're so sensible, projecting many things, you know, and the other one also, and like 20 or more people in the same one, it gets a bit more edgy. People like Salvador Roque, for example, did these things in therapy, and the results were not so impressive. No, I think you have to be careful. Having saying this, there may be some interesting things to explore. I know of groups, for example, they would join to do meta meditation, love compassion meditation, and they would use some mushrooms or LSD, for example, sometimes MDMA. I think there's some groupal dynamics like biodanza. I don't know if you know biodanza or this kind of movements with the body. They could be very well explored with a bit of psychedelics. If you're into movement and dancers, for example, with a bit of LSD or psychedelics, they could do things that would be very impressed probably. So I think it's possible to mix, but it's very important to be very careful, no? Careful with all the contraindications and with the dosages, very careful, no? And go exploring bit by bit. But I think it's also an interesting avenue. I think one of the beautiful things of psychedelics is that they are very generous, meaning by this that, you know, the same compound is used in pretty different ways by different cultures, societies, and people. So I think we just have to be, as a society, up to the level of these sacred medicines and just hold them in a very mindful and loving way. I think there's many possibilities if you do this.
That's a wonderful line, Javier, that the plants are very generous. And I think that's just so true, which is one of the reasons why I've chosen the background with the trees. You know, the plants are just very generous with we humans. And everywhere in the world, in ancient primordial times, the evidence indicates that as long as humans have been humans, they have been using plants to aid in spiritual growth and development. And even other species will seek out some kind of intoxication or some kind of mind-altering substances. So it's something that's embedded in the natural process. And one of the tragedies of modernity is we've become so cut off from that we're afraid of it. And in fact, in most countries around the world, as you know better than most, it is not only illegal, but you can go to prison for a very long time for possession of certain plants. And so we moderns, I would say, have a long way to go to get back to where we always were before we went into the process of state formation and what we call civilization.
Yeah, totally. And we don't have much time to do it, no? If you look at the world, it seems we need to do it fast.
Now, Javier, tell us about your PhD. Tell us, what do you want to research after everything you've been through, my friend? What is there left to research? What do you want to do a PhD in for with Ubiquity?
Well, you see, I'm very excited about this PhD because I hope it's going to allow me to bring together, because you see, I mean, we're opening a training for psychedelic therapists, which is the first training in Europe, and the one I described. No, we're going to have actual psychedelic therapy for the therapist, you know, so it's going to be very deep theoretically and also experientially. And I would like to be able to make like kind of a manual for Grofian Psychedelic Therapy, which within psychedelic therapy is a particular approach because of the theory that backs it up, but also because of body work, the particular use of music. So what I would like to do is bring together all this understanding of Stan and make it into a handy manual for therapists. That's my idea.
That's a wonderful idea. That's a wonderful idea.
The time is right, no?
Yeah. Tell us more about this program that you're developing in Europe. What is it dealing with? To give us some particulars of the program.
Well, it's a program that we developed. Stan developed it, and I helped him a bit, no? And it's based in all his work. So we go very deep into psychology. You see, I mean, when you talk about therapy, it's very important that the therapy is contained within a psychology. You know, that is the method and the vision. These things need to come together, no? And I think besides Grofian Psychedelic Therapy, psychedelic therapy is without a vision. You know, it's just like a technique, but there's no a full, complete background understanding of how it works, of the unconscious, of the depth of the unconscious, no? And I think this is lacking in a way. So I think it's very important for the future of psychedelic therapy to not to indulge in many mistakes that happened before, to understand really how they work, what is a holotropic state, the human mind, and then also the whole process, which is also very Grofian, no? Understand that we are in a spiritual path of self-knowledge, of self-understanding. That this path is a process, and in this process, holotropic states are very interesting steps, no? But it has a direction. So if you understand the psyche, the movement, the psychodynamics, the holotropic states, the direction, and then also the crisis that could happen in this movement, which is spiritual emergencies, you are pretty well equipped to work with these states in a as safe as a possible way this can happen, no? So that's what I mean by bringing together the method, which is very highly exposed these days in many countries in the world, and is trying to tie it with what we already knew from thousands of psychedelic sessions, what Stan knew and many other people, no? So we can save our society a lot of problems if we do this fast, you know? We should not begin trying to discover the wheel again. Like, how about psychedelics? Do you think I can have sex with the parents? Or do you think this was done, tried and tested, and no, you should not, you know? There's many parameters, limits, structure that should be kept because of how it works. So we don't need to start, you know, I'm very impressed, for example, Jim, I'm following the pulse of psychedelic research very closely, always, seeing the talks, the research in many pages, no? And many of the research, they don't even mention Stan. They don't even talk about perinatal. They don't even talk about it. And if you're not talking about it, it's because you have not even lived it. And if you have not lived it, let me tell you, you're just beginning the process.
Yeah.
You know, and these people is leading the research. And this is a bit scary because it's in your face. It's not so deep, it's just here. But this is the most superficial layer. But beyond this, there's such a technical, practical knowledge about psychology, psychopathology, which is Grofian psychology. You know, I think this is the treasure that holotropic states need to move safely into the future. So I would like to help a bit into this, you know, making it easier.
Right. You know, after 75 years, we're no longer at the frontier. We're at the stage that you're at, where we need to codify and make available the history of the pioneering efforts of people like Stan, so that we can stand on the shoulders of these giants and take the next step, rather than trying to recreate the wheel on our own. So just a final question, Javier, for people who want to get involved with either psychedelic therapy or Grof Legacy Training, tell us how to get involved with what you all are doing.
Super. Well, I mean, for holotropic work around the world, including Europe, you can go into the Grof Legacy Training. That's Grof. How you call this line like this?
A dash.
Yes, grof-legacy-training.com. And there you can see the trainings in the different countries. And if you're into psychedelic therapy, you want to be a holotropic psychedelic therapist, a Grofian, then we're doing right now this training in Europe, and we're in the middle of the admissions. So we're about half of the people is already in, and we're still doing all the other admissions. So it is open. And we're asking that people are either psychiatrists, psychologists, or licensed therapists, mental health licensed therapists. If you are within this range, you can apply and you can see information in Beckley Meds. That's Beckley, Beckley Meds, or the Beckley Foundation. Beckley Foundation, then Beckley Meds, and then you can see the program in Grofian Psychedelic Therapy. And this is going to be a hell of a ride, no? Because we're going to, as I told you, we're going to be able to have high
so
dose.
Beckley, I'm going to put it in the chat. Javier, it's Becy.
Yeah, Beckley, I can put if you want.
Okay.
It's here. Beckley Meds. This Beckley Meds is a branch of the Beckley Foundation. They were the ones behind all these neuroimages of LSD and DMT and the brain, very spectacular. And Beckley Meds is a branch for training therapists. So this is a conjunct effort between the Grof Legacy Training and Beckley Meds. So you're super welcome. And if you're a therapist, you're interested, it's still open. You can apply today.
Well, Javier, this has been an incredible journey. I have been very excited every step of the way. You have been through a process, my friend, that is not unique, but rare, I would say, in our world in terms of the depth and the scope and the wisdom that has come out of this journey. So I just want to acknowledge it. You know, there's a lot of people that have gotten into this domain that lose their way and they become casualties. But you have somehow been able to navigate your way through in a way that has been transformational and deepening in terms of your own self-awareness and your own sense of compassion for the world. And so I just want to acknowledge that. We're honored that you're part of our doctoral program. This gives a measure, everyone, to the kinds of things that Ubiquity University's doctoral program takes in. We have a doctoral program, as we say, without boundaries. We're looking for people like Javier who want to be on the cutting edge of research as humanity moves into the future, as humanity rises. And what Stan Grof has pioneered for many decades now is still, after all this time, literally on the cutting edge of human knowledge and awareness. And Javier is a very worthy student of Stan's that is taking it now into the next generation. So I just want to acknowledge that. I don't know whether you have time, Javier, but I want to invite all of you into the after chat session. And you'll see the chat link there, Javier. If you can take another 10, 15 minutes, people would, I think, be very interested in meeting you.
If there's any questions or anything we can talk about.
Yeah. And then tomorrow, everyone, we're going to have a friend of Javier's and Stan's, Ren Butler, talking about archetypal astrology, which is another vast domain that Stan and Rick Tarnas and others have developed over the last 30, 40 years as a really a Rosetta Stone of the psyche. So that'll be tomorrow here on Humanity Rising, same time, same station. But Javier, this has been brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jim. Really a pleasure.
Very excited. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow. Yes. Same time, same station. Bye for now.
Okay. Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.